Hey there, guys. It's Nick, the ASMR nerd, and welcome to another episode of Relaxing Reviews. Today, we're taking a look at a mechanical keyboard called the Womier K66. At least I think it's pronounced Womier, or that's how I'm going to pronounce it. Could be Womier, maybe, but I'm Canadian. I'm going to give it a bit of a French spin. We're calling it Womier. The Womier K66 is a compact 66 key keyboard that uses a fairly uncommon layout, actually. It looks a lot like the Leopold FC660M keyboard in terms of its layout. But it's kind of like a 65% board, so it's got dedicated arrow keys and a couple of nav cluster keys. But what's special about the Womier K66 is not its layout, but its construction. The case is made entirely of frosted acrylic plastic, and frosted acrylic cases have been gaining popularity over the last couple of years because they look really good. The benefit of them, of course, is that the RGB LEDs shine through with this beautiful kind of diffuse effect that just causes the case to glow with gorgeous light. But until now, the acrylic cases have been more or less restricted to enthusiast tiers of mechanical keyboard products, and they tend to be quite expensive. The Womier K66 aims to fix that. It comes in at a mere $60. So I'm very, very keen to see what Womier has been able to do at that price point. It would be a real treat to have an affordable frosted acrylic keyboard. To help us out today, Banggood.com has been kind enough to send over a Womier K66 for us to look at. And if you're interested in picking one up for yourself, there is, of course, a link down below the video in the description. So, without further ado, let's take a closer look at the Womier K66. And here we have the Womier K66 in box, such as it is. This is perhaps one of the most boring boxes I have ever seen for a mechanical keyboard, matched only by the GK61 and the GK66 from Geek that I reviewed a while back. But let us not be hasty. Let us not judge a book, or a keyboard in this case, by its cover. But I will just give you a very quick tour around here to show you that there is literally nothing on the outside here besides some kind of Banggood skew and a barcode there. Nothing on the top here whatsoever. Nothing on this side. Nothing around the back. And over here we have our only piece of Womier branding with the name and the model, the K66. Everything else is in Chinese. Maybe it says something about switches, but I do not know. On the back, I'm not going to show you because it's actually got the shipping labels on it, which has my address and such. But that's all that's there. There's no Womier branding, no product information whatsoever. So a very, very bare bones package. It feels reasonably weighty for a 60% board, I suppose. But we will see when we get it open, which we're going to do right now because there's nothing else to look at here. Now, one thing that's worth pointing out, it came like this. The box came ripped, and it came closed with a little bit of tape here, which I have cut to make this unboxing easier. This, in theory, comes with brown switches, some kind of brown switches. I do not know what brand. We will see if I actually received brown switches because this wouldn't be the first time that I got fooled if it did not come with the switches I had requested. It seems to happen an awful lot. Okay. Inside, we actually have a very respectable package, or protection, I should say, with a nice, thick foam surround all the way around. We are greeted with a very small, kind of minimal-looking user manual, but it is in English, which is a plus. That is more than many boards we get through here. We'll take a look at that in a second, but below that we have what appears to be a pretty nice looking keyboard. But let's reserve judgment until after we've pulled it out here. Okay. So the board is in this soft plasticky type bag that we've seen before. This foam surround hides a white PVC coated USB cable. I'm seeing good things here. We've got USB-A on one end. It's just a generic white housing, very Mac-like in its appearance, Apple-like. USB-C on this end, which is great. I'm glad to see a modern connector on here. So, thumbs up for the removable cable, thumbs up for it being USB Type-C. Thumbs down for the use of just twist ties. There's no reusable cable tie here, which would have been a nice touch, but that's okay. Alright, aside from that, nothing else in the package. This, as you can see, protects on all sides except the top, but it does a pretty solid job, by the looks of it, of protecting the K66 in shipment. So no complaints there, but interestingly, no keycap puller or any additional accessories, although given the price point, perhaps not terribly surprising. Alright, let's dispose of this very boring box. And let me tease you by putting the keyboard here and then going back to the user manual just for a quick peek. We've got English on one side, Chinese on the other. On the English side, it says, user manual for Womier glazed RGB keyboard. I've never heard of a keyboard called glazed before, and that is of course referring to the transparent acrylic case. Please read the operation manual carefully before using the product and keep it properly. Hear that, guys? Keep it properly. Model K66, some company information, some electrical information. Keyboard made of polymeric methyl methacrylate by CNC Techniques. That's, I think, a fancy way of saying standard acrylic. Type-C USB 3.1 interface. Oh, very good. T-flash storage memory to save the last setup automatically. Many cool light effects modes for choice. RGB color for reach combination. Customized color as your favor. Don't know what that means. Immersion gold FR4 PCB Technic. Attachable USB cable for concise acceptance and easily carry. Alright, so, the English is a little bit rough, but you get the idea. It gets the point across. I do not think there is software for this board. I did not see any advertised. I will double check, but I don't think there is. Package contents, a K66 glazed colorful keyboard and a Type-C cable. Model weight, 580 grams. It feels quite solid. And then some information about controlling the backlighting effects. And that's pretty much that. We will, of course, take a closer look at that stuff shortly. But first, the board itself. Okay, so. Put this away. By which I mean toss it on the floor for now. Here we have the Womier K66. It's a pretty cool looking board, isn't it? It is not a fully standard design. So everything up here looks like a typical 60% design. However, things get funky on the right hand side of the board and along the bottom row. Here we have a typical 1.5U control, but then we have a 1U OS key, which actually has the Womier symbol, and then a 1.5U alt, standard size spacebar, then 1.5U alt, 1U function key, 1.5U control, dedicated arrow keys, a shortened 2U shift, and then way up here we have the home and delete keys separated from the main bank of keys. Also interesting to note that the shift key actually it's normally when you have a shortened shift key, it's shortened such that the dedicated up arrow sits in line with these keys here, with the backspace, backslash, and enter. In this case, it does not. It's actually offset slightly, so we get this slight stepped effect over here. And then, of course, yeah, the home and delete sitting slightly spaced apart from the rest of the board actually end up looking like a bit like some of those Leopold boards that have a similar design with these independent keys set aside like this. And it looks a bit like the design of a somewhat shortened Magic Force 2, which actually has an additional 2 keys out here. Anyway, very interesting design, interesting choices, but fairly unique. It does set it apart. Okay, so layout aside, let's get to what might be the most interesting part of this board, which is the case. The case is a slab of frosted acrylic. And you can see that it's really just got this kind of sandwich construction with a top piece and a bottom piece. And it's just kind of stuck together with screws here. And you can see right into the case. You can see those screws. The corners are nicely rounded off, although these edges are sharp. Around the back here, the back right corner, we have our USB Type-C connection. We carry around. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. But the idea, of course, is that your LEDs are mounted on the PCB, which is sort of embedded within this sandwich slab. It is the salami in our sandwich, if you will. And in theory, that light should radiate forth and kind of diffuse forth from this frosted acrylic. And it is frosted. It's not a sort of a shiny acrylic, which is great because that means it doesn't pick up fingerprints nearly as easy. If it was a polished acrylic, we would have concerns about scratches and scuffs and fingerprints, but not the case here. Should also make for a really nice diffuse soft lighting effect. Let's flip it around and would you look at that? There's nothing on the back of this board. It is just one continuous chunk of acrylic. And you can see in there the underside of the PCB, which is pretty cool. I dig that. We've got a number of little Phillips head screws around the outside, which could probably be very easily removed with just a screwdriver should you want to. open this thing up. We've got 4 feet here. 1, 2, 3, 4. The ones down here are slightly embedded in the case, so they're quite low profile. The ones at the back are of a higher profile. They're thicker, and they're not embedded into the case in the same way. Actually, they may be. Yeah, they are sunk a little bit. Don't know if you can tell, but they're just sunk in a little bit. But being thicker means that this will have a slight incline to it, very minor. But otherwise, it's a totally flat design. We have OEM style, OEM profile caps, and then, yeah, just that tiny bit of incline conferred by these slightly thicker back feet, but it'll only be a degree or two, just very, very slight. Okay, you know what, guys, though? I'm really liking what I'm seeing here. Like, this is cool. This is different, and that's really what it's all about, isn't it? It's so hard to stand out these days in the budget mechanical keyboard world. But what I'm seeing here is quite unique. And it feels solid because, as I said, it's just a chunk of acrylic. There's very little airspace in here. It's just like that. That PCB is embedded within the slab of acrylic. I will say I can feel a mold line along here, or a joining line, I guess, where the top plate and the bottom plate of the case join one another. You know what, actually, it's more than 2 pieces. This is actually 3 pieces of acrylic. You can see that here. So it's not quite, it's more like a club sandwich, the Big Mac, if you will, with 1, 2, 3 pieces of acrylic. So, and you can sort of feel those lines in between, and there are some sort of, you can see where that middle piece of acrylic here, it's very apparent here. The middle piece of acrylic has rounded edges around the USB-C hole here, but the top and bottom actually have sharp edges, so it makes that look a little less clean than it could, but very minor aesthetic thing. All around, though, it feels good, it feels solid. Surprisingly not nearly as much flex to it as I would expect either. I'll give it a proper flex test in a second. But let's take a quick look at the keycaps and switches. Now, it certainly felt, yes, like we've got brown switches here. We do have brown switches. Let's pull off a cap. No keycap puller included, but these are it's a floating key style design, so it's easy enough to just pull them off with your fingers there. Now, what the heck is going on here? Are these double shot caps? That is a good question. I will say they're not the thickest caps ever. Relatively thin as they go, and they do flex a bit, as you can see. But they look pretty good. The legends are very sharp, and they don't appear to suffer from any of the sort of typical double shot jankiness that you sometimes see, the stencil-like appearance that you get with double shot caps. I don't think these are double shot. I think these are UV coated. I think they're UV coated ABS. Now they have an almost PBT-like texture to them, I will say, which is to say it's a little bit more of a matte feel. They feel like they're not going to shine up. But I'm thinking that these, for instance, the side printed legends here, you would only be able to get them nice and sharp like that. And you would only be able to get shine through side print, I think, like that, if we are using UV coated laser etched caps. So I do believe that's what's going on here. That said, it feels nice. It's not very textured. It is relatively smooth. But I don't think these are going to get too fingerprinty too quick. I don't think they're going to shine up too badly. And as long as the UV coating is done well, it shouldn't wear off easily. Now, are they going to be as durable as double shot caps? No. Will they shine up more than PBT caps? Yes, they will. But again, considering the price point, I think that's okay. And considering the aesthetics, I think that's okay. The biggest benefit of those laser etched UV coated caps is you get these beautiful sharp legends. I do like the font that they've chosen here quite a bit. I think writing space on the space bar is kind of tacky. I would prefer to just have the traditional line or dots that you see on some boards, but it's not a deal breaker for me. Now, keycap compatibility is not going to be stellar because, of course, we have that slightly weird layout going on over here in the non-standard bottom row. So you can't necessarily just pick up any set of keycaps, any cheapo set off AliExpress and go. But it's not disastrous either. You should be able to find caps that will fit if you go looking around. Let's take a quick look at the switch situation here, or the switchuation as I like to call it. We have, I'm just trying to look at this. We have Gateron switches. I'm going to hold that up there for you to see. Hopefully you can see that branding on there. That is great because Gateron makes some really nice switches. Gateron browns are in fact some of my favorite brown switches. They're very smooth, very pleasing to type on. So I'm actually pleased to see the Gaterons. I prefer them over Temu or other cheap switch options. Finally, I would like to check the stabilizers. They don't sound too bad. They don't sound amazing. There's definitely some rattle there, but it's not bad. Let's just pull off our enter key over here. And let's take a peek. So, we've got standard cherry style stabilizers in white, which is a great choice because it means that it doesn't clash with the white PCB and the frosted acrylic aesthetic. You can see that when you look at it in profile, those stabilizers don't stand out. If they were black, they'd look kind of ugly from that angle, but they aren't, and they don't, so that's great. They're not factory lubed, so they do rattle a fair bit, but they seem to be of decently good quality because they're not horrendous. Nevertheless, I might recommend lubing them if you have the inclination to do so. Definitely smooth things out a little bit. Fascinating little board. Fascinating. We've got, of course, some side printed legends here, which will be to do with the backlighting control, as detailed on the or in the user manual there. A couple up here as well. Some of them are also for secondary function layers, like page down, page up. Looking pretty good. Very interesting keyboard overall. Last thing we're going to do before we move on is the flex test. Let's see what it's got. Not bad, you know, actually, it flexes less than I expected, given that it appears to have no metal built into it. It's just acrylic and PCB. And so I thought without a steel plate in there, it might not be that stiff, but actually it's got some good stiffness to it, conferred no doubt by these 3 slabs of acrylic, all one up against the next, So, initial impressions, very favorable. As I've said a couple of times now, a very interesting board that sets itself apart with some unique aesthetics and material choices, and a unique layout that I've not really seen in exactly this way before. I think some smart choices were made in terms of the keycaps as well, and it's unfortunate that they seem a little on the thin side, but what you gonna do? So, next step, let's put this thing through its paces. We're going to check out the backlighting functionality, take a look at those secondary functions. No software as far as I'm aware, so we're not going to look at that, but we will of course take it for a typing test before we come back around to go over the pros and cons, and I give you my final verdict. Let's go check out that backlighting. And here we have the Womier K66 plugged in. And guys, I think we may have found peak RGB, because honestly, look at this thing. This thing is positively glowing in every way. So, this is a little bit overwhelming right now. We've got the side lighting, the underlighting, whatever you want to call it. I guess it's underlighting in this case because it's the whole case. Doing a crazy kind of RGB rotation thing. And then we've also got the backlighting of the keys doing a similar kind of thing. So we'll take a look at the lighting, both the underlighting and the backlighting independently here. And I'm actually going to turn off each one while we test the other, just so you can more easily see what effects are going on here, and before I put them both on together again and demonstrate how they can be kind of coordinated. It's a little windy outside, so if you hear some wind ambience in the background, some leaves scratching at the window, we have a bamboo plants right outside the window that sometimes make noise. That's what that is. So let's start off by disabling. Let's disable the underlight. Actually, before I do that, I will show you the brightness options. Not many brightness levels. This is the maximum brightness. It's really bright. It's like almost eye-searingly bright. It is by far the brightest RGB peripheral I have plugged in. Maybe the brightest RGB peripheral I've ever encountered. So its maximum brightness is kind of overwhelming, but you can hold down function and press delete. And we have sort of a middle level, which is much more reasonable. And then the lowest level I actually find is maybe my preferred, because it's just not quite so crazy. Then after that, it's off. And you can see caps lock flashes over there to indicate that we've hit the bottom of the brightness. There we are. Medium again, max brightness. If you're seeing any flickering whatsoever on the video, it's not visible in real life. I always say that's just as an artifact of the frequency of the LEDs and the shutter speed of the camera. I don't think there's any visible in the video, but if you do see anyone or any, it's not actually there. In real life, the gradients are very smooth. The colors look very nice. And that's it in terms of brightness adjustment, so fairly basic there. So let's turn off the underlighting, which is accomplished by holding function and pressing left control. So there's a few options to go through. I believe that's off. It's a little hard to tell, isn't it? Let's turn them both off to start with. So the backlighting is controlled by function right control. Okay. No, that's a reactive mode. So we'll just quickly flip through these until I get it to... Okay, that's actually off. So now both are off. So let's start with the backlighting here. So there is this fixed mode where it is a fixed rainbow by default. However, this board actually has a very clever way of picking a color for your backlight. And the way it works, because this board has no software, so you can't configure the backlighting in software. A lot of other boards will just have a preset series of colors that you can go through for each lighting pattern, or even for the fixed lighting. There might be, I don't know, 7 or 8 different sort of colors. Here, what you can do is if you go function spacebar, the entire keyboard switches to this color palette, basically. And then the next key you press will become the color that the whole board takes. So let's say we want, I don't know, let's go U. There we go. Now the whole board is the color that U was. Let's say we want to pick a new color. Function spacebar, we get our palette back. And you can tell when you're in this mode because the spacebar LED cycles through the rainbow here. And it does that for a particular reason. I'll show you in a second. But let's go, I don't know, E. There. You've got kind of a greeny aqua, I think. This is the colorblind guy. Let's do one more. Let's go like, I don't know. There we go. Kind of a reddy-orange. Okay, so back at our color selection palette, if we want to set it back to rainbow colored mode, not the selection palette, but the actual coloration of the backlight, we just press spacebar again, and there we are. So that's really clever. I've never seen backlighting selection implemented that way before, and props to Womier for coming up with something different and effective, because it gives you access to, well, at least 66, I guess, different colors, or 65, because the spacebar is the rainbow option. So 65 unique colors, which is, granted, not the full 16.8 million colors available using true RGB, red, green, blue channel coloring, but it's still pretty good, and you'll probably be able to get whatever color you're looking for, or pretty close to, using this method. And let's be real, the color fidelity of most LEDs in backlights I don't think are anywhere close to good enough to actually render 16.8 million different color combinations. I don't know what the actual color fidelity is, but it's probably much lower than that. So I think this is a very effective way of offering different color options, a wide variety of color options without a software solution. So again, props to Womier for that. Okay, so let's start stepping through the different backlight modes. So we have our classic left to right rainbow wave. Couple drawbacks here. There doesn't appear to be any way to change the direction of the effect, so you're stuck going left to right. I don't believe we can go right to left. And I don't believe there's any way to change the speed of the effects. So those are both minor drawbacks, but they kind of bug me because I like to be able to change those things. And again, there's no software to configure this. You might wonder about function and the arrow keys because often those control direction and speed. In this case, however, function left and right control system volume, and function up and down are actually page up and page down. And very briefly here, while we're on the topic of secondary functions on keys, the Womier doesn't have very many. We get page up and page down on these up and down buttons, and that's it. We've got home and delete, of course, on fixed buttons up here. There's no end, there's no insert, there's no print screen. None of those are available on a secondary function layer, and that's frankly kind of disappointing. Now, you could use third-party software to configure that, but I just wish that that we had those options on some of these keys here as secondary functions, because that's something you see on a lot of keyboards. 60% or 65%-ish keyboards often map those to the secondary layer on these keys. We do have a tilde over here as a secondary function on escape. And then we have F1 through F12, of course, bound to our number keys. But yeah, aside from that and the backlighting controls, there's nothing. So that's a bit disappointing. Okay, so we'll keep stepping through the backlighting options here, but very quickly I just want to show you that you don't have to have the keyboard in static color mode in order to change the color. So we're in like rainbow wave mode. If we go function spacebar, we have our color selection palette again. Let's go, I don't know, question mark. So now we have wave mode, but in the question mark color, as it were. So that's pretty cool. You can see in this particular color, the backlights are actually quite a bit dimmer, which is interesting. Just limitations of the LEDs. We want to change it back to rainbow mode, function space, then space again. And there we are. Okay, moving through the backlighting options. This one just cycles through the various colors in a nice, relatively slow fashion. Here we have a breathing mode, which defaults to rainbow, but again could be set to any color that's available in the palette. This is a slightly different kind of rainbow wave, it looks like. Kind of a slower, broader wave. I actually like that. That's kind of chill. It's nice. Okay, here we've got a rotating color mode. It's kind of moving around clockwise. I think this is what I had on at the very beginning there. So then we've got some reactive modes. We've got the typical flash when you press it. And this is rainbow, but again, you can pick the color with the palette. We've got the light up and fade out when you press a key. We've got the horizontal lines shooting out. This is kind of a sparkle mode where each key individually cycles through color. And I'd just like to point out, I mean, you can see, but even just the backlighting, this is without any of the side lighting or underlighting or whatever you want to call it. Even with just the backlighting, that frosted acrylic looks so good. Just picks up and diffuses all the colors. Here we kind of have a twinkle star effect. We've got a vertical wave coming down of color. We've got a sine wave that is admittedly kind of chunky in its animation. And unfortunately, again, no way to change the speed. And this is kind of like lines moving across diagonally. That's different. I haven't really seen that before. This is like a raindrops mode. That's kind of nice. And then we've got waves. Oh, bouncing back and forth. That's cool. And I guess this is a solid color mode. Well, that's interesting. It's a solid color mode without color configuration. Oh no, it's slowly fading through, I think. Very slowly. Is it? Maybe not. This doesn't let us change the color. Interesting. Oh, and here we have ripples moving out from the center, rippling outwards. I like how slow this one is. This is very relaxed, very zen, almost hypnotic. And that's off. So we've now gone through all of the backlighting. Let's look now at the side lighting or underlighting. I don't really know what to call it. We'll call it underlighting as we have been, even though it's not technically that either. Oops, that's not the right combination at all. So, oops, function left control is what we want. So there is our default underlighting, edge lighting thing. It's like RGB racing, rainbow racing around the edge. And unfortunately, no way to control the speed on that one, but you can configure color, I believe. Yeah, in the same way you can for the backlighting. So let's say you wanted it in U color. There you go. Want it back in RGB? Ta-da! Just that easy. Really like the way they've done that. So we've got a cycling through colors option here. I suspect this doesn't have a palette option. Oh, it does. Weird. But it doesn't really do anything, does it? Funny that it gives us the option. Okay. Yes, and then we've got breathing. And by default, it breathes in different colors. But again, I think our palette options work here. And then it just breathes in one color. Yes, indeed. Quite effective. Okay. Let's go back to the RGB on that one. And then we have solid color mode. So if you just want one color, you can do so. And you can match this by going, again, going to our palette and just matching it with the color of your backlight, which is nice. That's funny. I just set it by going back to function there. Okay. And then off. So those are our options. Let's set this back to rainbow. There we go. Let's give ourselves, rainbow wave backlight there. So those are our color options for the backlight and the side light slash underlight slash whatever we're calling it. And I have to say again, they all look amazing. I'll actually move this and give you a look from other angles here, since that is kind of part of the draw here, as you can see it from the side. I guess it is technically underlighting, because if I just give myself a little more cable there, you can see those LEDs are actually situated on the bottom. So this is an underlight. It just happens to shine through the edges as well. But it looks just all really nice. The frosted acrylic is just fantastic for transmitting that light in a way that looks nice. I do lament the lack of speed control and direction control, but I do applaud Womier for their implementation of the color control. And I will say, it casts nice light out onto your desk as well. I've got it kind of cropped in close here for this, but you can see it does cast light quite a ways off to the sides and out the front and off the back of the board as well. So, some very serious desktop bling here. All right, well, nothing else really to talk about. I've talked about the backlighting, the underlighting, the relatively paltry secondary function options. There's no wireless connectivity with this board, so no Bluetooth or anything to talk about. And there's no software to talk about, so that's it. Next up is the typing test. Let's see how this thing sounds and looks in action. Alright, so we've had the chance to inspect the Womier K66 quite thoroughly, from the unboxing to looking at the backlighting and the underlighting, and of course to giving it the old typing test which you just heard. I have some things to say about it, I have some opinions to share about it. I'm going to do that as I run down the pros and the cons in just a moment before giving you my final verdict. Starting over here with the pros, the things that I liked about the Womier K66. The first thing and the most striking thing is, of course, that beautiful frosted acrylic case. I've never seen anything quite like it, to be honest. And if you're looking for peak RGB in your keyboard, you found it. This is a fantastic looking keyboard. Regardless of what color or pattern you have it set to, the combination of the bright and vibrant LEDs for the backlighting and the underlighting mixed with that frosted acrylic that really gives it this beautiful diffuse kind of glow is really quite striking. It's a really lovely aesthetic. The second thing that I really like about this board is its uncommon layout. This keyboard borrows a layout that is very similar to the Leopold FC660M, I believe is the model. It's a fairly common or well-known compact keyboard from Leopold, and a lot of enthusiasts like it. It's not a layout that you see very commonly aside from that, but it retains the dedicated arrow keys, and it's got a couple of nav cluster keys as well. It fits it all into a fairly compact chassis, and it has a bit of a unique aesthetic to it as well, with that slightly offset arrow cluster and then those two nav cluster keys that are spaced away from the main body a little bit. It gives it a little bit more visual interest anyway than your average 60% layout. Third thing that I really enjoyed about this keyboard was the color selection method for the backlight. This is a method I've never seen before. If you watch the section where I talk about the backlight and the underlight, you'll see what I mean, but basically it turns the entire keyboard into a palette, and then you just press the key that has the corresponding color that you desire, and then the whole keyboard will turn that color. It's a clever way of offering ample color options without having to resort to software. So props to Womier for figuring that out. Fourth thing I like about this board is the Gateron switches. I'm a strong proponent of Gateron switches because I find them significantly smoother than their Cherry or Outemu counterparts, and honestly I would take them over either of those. And of course you'll pay substantially more for a genuine Cherry MX switch, but in my opinion the Gaterons are better anyway, so I'm happy to see them implemented here. Now I should say that the actual typing experience with this board is merely average, I will say, and I didn't find the switches quite as enjoyable as I have on some other boards. I think that has to do with the thinness of the keycaps, which we'll talk about in a moment in the cons section, and I think the acrylic case material also confers a slightly different typing feel that's maybe a little bit flat. There was no pinging, of course, because there's no metal to resonate in this board, but the bottom out was a little bit harsh and clacky and flat. So the typing experience, while average, was totally serviceable, and the Gateron switches themselves are a big benefit and a big plus in my opinion. And finally, I have to call out the price of this board. It is remarkably inexpensive for what you're getting, coming in at just $60. This board offers impressive value. Over here in the cons section, I do have a few things to complain about, but they are mostly fairly minor gripes. Nevertheless, it's important to step through them here. The first of them is the cheap feeling keycaps on this board. I will admit They look very nice with the bright backlighting on this board. The laser etched UV coated caps have very sharp legends, which complements the backlighting very nicely. But the keycaps themselves felt quite thin. There's a lot of flex going on there. They're made of ABS material, which is generally not my favorite, and they're not double shots, so over time those legends may start to wear away. If the UV coating is done well, they shouldn't, but nonetheless, they just felt cheap. I think it was mostly the thinness of the keycaps that contributed to that feeling, and it was a little bit unfortunate. The second thing that I wasn't crazy about is related to those cheap keycaps. You might reasonably want to replace the cheap keycaps. However, because of the uncommon layout of this keyboard, there's one key in particular that confers limited keycap compatibility to the Womier K66, and that is the right shift key. It is a weird size. It's a little bit longer than what you'll find on, say, a 75% or a 96 keyboard, but it's significantly shorter than what you find on a typical 60% or 10 keyless board. I looked through a few of my keycap sets to see if there was anything that was compatible. None of them had a shift key in that size. I did, however, find that the enter key and the plus key from the numpad are actually the right size for that shift key spot. And so I was able to kind of hack something together, although the profile is not quite correct using one of those numpad keys in that shift spot. All this is to say that this board does have somewhat limited keycap compatibility, and that right shift key in particular is not something that you're going to find in many keycap sets. Third thing that's a little bit unfortunate about this board is the limited lighting control. And what I mean about that is, one, we have no per key backlighting color control, so that's a bit of a drawback. Two, we have no speed control for the animated effects on the board, which is also a bit of a bummer. And three, we have no direction control for those effects. Individually, these are fairly minor gripes. Altogether, it does degrade or detract from the backlighting control experience, which is a shame because this board is all about the backlighting. And it wouldn't have been that hard to throw in another couple pairs of keys on a secondary function layer that would allow us to control these things. So if Womier ever goes to make a V2 of this board, for instance, that's an addition that I would really like to see. Another limitation of this board is just the secondary function layer in general is pretty sparse. You've got page up and page down. You've got, of course, your F-row keys. You've got tilde. But other than that, you're lacking a variety of keys, including end, insert, print screen, and some others that I personally make fairly regular use of. And it's unfortunate that Womier didn't go that extra mile to include them on a secondary function layer. Again, maybe something for a V2. And finally, it's really unfortunate that this board has no software, because in theory, all of these things that I am complaining about here, except for the cheap keycaps and the keycap compatibility, but the rest of them could all be fixed with software support, because you could have those backlighting and side lighting controls in the software. You could have remapping for a secondary function layer in the software. So it's unfortunate that Womier doesn't ship any software for this keyboard. Now, in terms of the layout configurability, you could use a third-party program, something like Auto Hotkey or whatever, to do that yourself, but it's just an extra step, and it doesn't fix the issue with the lack of lighting configurability. So I think some software to go with this board really would have helped it shine. So what then is my final verdict on Womier's K66 acrylic case mechanical keyboard? Well, you may have picked up on the fact that I am quite impressed with this little board. It is a fun and interesting little keyboard. Granted, the typing experience is fairly average, but the aesthetics are where this board excels. That acrylic case looks so, so good. You had a chance to see it in the backlighting section there. I'm sure you agree with me. It looks really awesome, and the vibrant and bright LEDs for the backlighting and the underlighting really make it shine. I do have a few small gripes. Of course, I would have liked a little bit more backlighting control, per key configurability, and speed and direction controls would have been nice. And the lack of software is a bummer. But these complaints, I think, pale in comparison to the brilliance of this board's aesthetics. And the cherry on top, of course, is that this board is just $60. Honestly, at that price, it feels like a steal. And I can't think of any other keyboards with full acrylic cases that come anywhere close to the Womier K66 in price. So if you're looking for a full acrylic mechanical keyboard under $100, as far as I'm concerned, the K66 is pretty much the only game in town. So if you like the aesthetics, and let's be real, who wouldn't, and you are okay with, a compact 66 key layout, then without reservations, I can recommend the Womier K66. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of yet another relaxing review. Special thanks to banggood.com for sending over the review sample that we took a look at here today. And if you are interested in picking up the Womier K66 for yourself, there is, of course, a link down in the video description where you can do just that. Special thanks, of course, also to each and every one of you guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this informative. I hope you found it relaxing. And I look very forward to having you back here next time for another episode of Relaxing Reviews. Bye for now, guys.